Thanks. Well, welcome everybody. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes and just talk a little bit, give you a little bit of an overview of Couchbase. Then I'm going to spend a minute and just talk about how we see the opportunity in NoSQL, and then more specifically, how we see NoSQL being adopted in the market. And then I'll just open it up to questions. If you happen to have any questions for me, then happy to take them. So first, just Couchbase. For those that may not know, Couchbase is clearly one of the leaders in the NoSQL space. You may have heard of MongoDB and DataStax, and the three companies now, I think, are pretty much universally viewed as the leaders in NoSQL. There are, from what I hear, 40 to 50 NoSQL technologies, companies, but those three companies have clearly separated themselves from the rest of the pack. We're all making huge investments in continuing to evolve our product, in setting up distribution channels and support channels around the world, and we're growing much faster than the others. And so, as happens in many of these rapidly growing markets, the leaders emerge and then kind of continue to separate themselves. So we're very, very proud and happy to be a part of that leadership group. Very quickly, just on the NoSQL opportunity, I'm sure all of you likely have experience with relational technologies, and obviously relational is a $35 billion database industry, and relational technologies have dominated for the last 40 years. According to IDC, it's still 92% of that $35 billion industry is still based on relational technology. So most of the database use still is relational. But we think that's going to dramatically change. We think in 10 to 15 years, less than 50% of the database industry is going to be based on relational technology. Too early to tell, will it be 50%, 40%, 30%, but we think it's going to be a radical shift. And I'm not going to talk a lot about all the reasons for the shift. I'll just summarize it by saying two of the big mega trends: the move to cloud-based computing, whether that's private cloud or public cloud, more cloud-based applications, combined with the big data mega trend. Those are the two big trends and various things associated with it that are really driving people to use different database technologies and increasingly to use NoSQL. So that's a super quick summary. I oftentimes talk for an hour or two just about that subject, but we do see a massive change in the use of databases, and we're happy to be a part of that. I'll talk next just a little bit about how we actually have seen NoSQL being adopted in the market. Obviously, NoSQL is dominated by open source companies. All the three companies we mentioned, and certainly Couchbase is 100% open source. And like most open source technologies, the first phase of adoption is typically grassroots developer adoption. People like you going home literally or figuratively on the weekend, downloading the software, installing it, starting to play with it and use it. Hopefully you like it. If you do, you oftentimes bring it into your companies and start using it there, experiment with it more. Oftentimes use it on fairly lightweight applications. And in the early days, from 2007-ish, which actually is 3 years before Couchbase even started, but Cassandra and Mongo started in that time frame, and that's when we started to see, the grassroots developer adoption start. Certainly a lot of startup companies, a lot of small companies, but also many enterprises doing this kind of grassroots adoption. And during that phase, the developer, the richness of the development environment and ease of development was probably the most important criteria for success during that phase. And then in 2013, we started to see a very big change in the market. And that's when enterprises started to deploy NoSQL under mission-critical and business-critical applications. So they kind of, based on their own grassroots developer adoption, they got experience with NoSQL, and in increasing numbers, the enterprises came to the conclusion that NoSQL was ready for prime time, right? That it was feature-rich enough, that it was stable enough, that it was reliable enough, that you could now start deploying it under the first few mission-critical and business-critical applications. And during this phase, the criteria for success completely changed. And certainly the richness of the development environment was still important, but now scalability and performance became very, very important. I mean, you really couldn't deploy NoSQL under mission critical and business critical applications unless your technology was easy to scale, it was reliable at scale, it had high performance in terms of low latencies and high throughputs. And this is where Couchbase really shined. This is where Couchbase really took off. So we did well in phase one, but many of you are probably familiar with Mongo. That's where Mongo did really well because they focused most of their energy on ease of development. Our real differentiation is scalability and performance, and so once that became kind of the focus, what you really had to have, which has happened in phase two, that's when we just absolutely took off. So we're doing extremely well. We do, when many enterprises are running very deep strategic evaluations now of all the different players, and we're just doing extremely well. And it's very much based, again, on that leadership in terms of scalability and performance. Very quickly, we see phase three happening. It actually hasn't started yet, we don't think. Phase three, we think, is going to start in the second half of next year. And phase three is all about very broad deployment of NoSQL within companies. So in phase two, oftentimes it's deployment under 2 applications, 3, a dozen, something like that. Relatively small number, and enterprises are really getting comfortable that the NoSQL technologies can stand under the rigor of mission-critical, business-critical apps. But they're already starting to look at very broad deployment of NoSQL and then really replacing incumbent technologies like Oracle and DB2 and Microsoft SQL Server and MySQL on a very broad basis. So when you went from phase one to phase two, the industry grew it was kind of an inflection point in the growth of the industry. And as we moved from phase two to phase three, we think there's going to be another big inflection point. So a lot of exciting things. Again, to kind of summarize, and then I'll see if you have any questions. Again, coming back to, we see this big disruption taking place. NoSQL, which are really all about operational databases. Obviously, there's also disruption taking place in the analytics side of things with Hadoop. We just saw the first big data company file to go public with Hortonworks filing a week or 2 ago. I think you'll see you'll see other of the leaders start to file public over the next 12 to 18 months. So it's a super exciting space in general, and hopefully you guys all see this as an exciting technology, as one where, from a personal career perspective, it makes a lot of sense to just learn the technology, start to become expert on it. We think the need for skills associated with big data and new operational databases, new analytics technologies like Hadoop and NoSQL is going to continue to grow very rapidly. Hopefully that was interesting, and if it wasn't and you want me to talk about other things, I'm happy to talk about anything about Couchbase. You want Ravi to get up here so you can ask some technical questions. Okay, well, great. I really appreciate you being here today, and I will turn it over to the next guest, I guess.
Yes.
Thank you.